everybody, it is Kurt Molly here. I am with a good friend of mine, Danny Iny. We're going to be talking about online courses today. We're going to be talking about Danny's book as well. I got to make sure it doesn't disappear here. Now, I've known Danny, I want to say close to 7 years, if I'm right. I was kind of doing the math, maybe 7, 8 years.
I'll have to really something like that. I don't know exactly, but like it's been a long time, and that's internet years, right? So, in real life,
that is a long time.
We've always known each other.
One of the great things about being in this online marketing space is kind of rubbing shoulders with certain individuals at masterminds or smaller events. And that's where I met Danny at. And I'll never forget, I mean, Danny, over the years, you've invited me to some of your masterminds, which are typically a little bit smaller. You went on a tour of cities where you didn't do like smaller masterminds of 25 people. They were masterminds of 3 or 4 people, which I will never forget. But the way that your brain works and how you've attacked business over the years, whether we're talking about writing multiple books, whether we're talking about straight up Fahrenheit marketing, whether we're talking about changing a business name, changing a business structure, or just overall helping people. I mean, Danny, I really do. I look to you and I ask you lots of smart questions, kind of like I did before this, because the way your brain works is brilliant. So I'm really excited to introduce you to our crowd. People should have seen some emails from us before as they've gotten to know you. But Danny, I got to tell you, I've been starting to read this book. I have some questions for you on online courses. And as you know, and it depends for who you're watching or who's watching us, I run a bunch of Facebook ads, but we run ads and we also sell courses, but we run ads for a lot of courses. And there's a lot of people that can build out courses. So let's kind of dive in and talk about that, Danny. Well, first of all, again, thanks for being here. I usually just dive into stuff with you because you're smart. And I'm like, I just want to learn. So again, thank you for being here. I appreciate you very much. And
the feeling is mutual. I'm honored to be here, and I've always appreciated you as a friend and as a colleague. So yeah, let's jump in.
Let's talk about the book here real quick. I'm going to have a link on the screen that's going to be the belt.live/Danny. It's the belt.live/Danny. And again, it'll be up on the screen. When you click that link, it's going to take you over on how to get access to the book. Now, depending on when you see this video, I can't give you the specifics, but when you do pick this up, there are 3 bonuses in here that I'm telling you are worth their weight in gold anyway. For how long I've known Danny, the content that's here, it's great. Well, Danny, one of the questions I had for you right before we started this is, one, of course, we want people to read the book. But the other thing is we've personally helped multiple people. I think I mentioned it's like 13 people hit a New York Times best-selling author. They sell books because they want to have a label behind it that they're a New York Times best-selling author. I love what you said. You have over 1,000 reviews combined with all the different books that you've sold, which is absolutely amazing. But how do you get people to read the book? There's some brilliance in here, but we want people to get it, and we're going to bribe them with some additional bonuses in the book. But how do you get them to read it?
Well, so I love the question, and this is a very different book from stuff I've written in the past, and I've done a lot of writing, and I went in this very different direction for 2 reasons. Right. And so the direction, of course, is it's a business parable. So you're not reading about online courses. You're really exploring the experience of someone discovering the journey and where they stumble and where they get it right and where they have trouble and all that kind of stuff. And there are 2 reasons I went with that format. The first is just being aware of my own reading patterns. I read a lot. And I've noticed that, if a book is in the form of a story, the bar for how good it has to be to hold my attention is just much lower, right? It's easier to get sucked into a story. And, you don't want people, you want the book to be good enough that it's worth working through, but you want it to be so good that they don't have to work through it, that it just kind of pulls them through. The other reason I really went with this format is that, I have published a lot of other books, a lot of other content about online courses, and people seem to like it. And yet often there's a disconnect between reading about all these ideas and the market forces and where the opportunity lies and the steps and all that kind of stuff to actually going out and doing it. And that disconnect is really about, in the words of Yogi Berra, right? In theory, there's a difference between theory and practice. In practice, there is, right? So, it's one thing to hear about someone telling you about their ski trip. It's very different to be at the top of the hill looking down and like, oh God, this is terrifying. Right? It's one thing to read a book about parenting. It's very different to be sitting across from a 3-year-old who's throwing spaghetti and screaming around the wall. It's a different experience. And so what I wanted to do with this book is just give people the opportunity to ride shotgun on that whole journey, to see what it actually feels like, to try it on for size.
I like that, because what happens is I open up the book, and of course, we're going to do an interview, and I want to ask you some questions about the book. And I open it up, and I'm like, okay, let's get right into specific things about the courses. And I'm like, wait a minute, chapter one's talking about Amy, how she's getting started. And I start to read into it, and I'm like, I kind of started out this way. Like, I can relate to this. So when you said riding shotgun in the car, that's when my jaw kind of drops. I'm like, oh my goodness, I felt exactly like that when I was reading it, the turns and how she has to describe herself. So that comes up with one of the things which is interesting. So the character in the story, they're going through, she comes up with an idea, she's meeting with a friend, and then they come up with something that's called LTL, which is kind of an acronym formula. Maybe it's this first idea. We're going to talk about monetizing ideas here in a second and establishing value. But how do you even start to kind of think about, do I have a method? Do I even have information that I could sell? Like, courses sound great, but I'm not a PhD. I don't have a college education. Heck, I don't even have a high school education. I don't even know if I can do it. How do you even get into do I even have a formula inside of me?
Yeah, I love that question. So here's the real, because people get tripped up with, do I have the credentials? Am I a recognized expert, recognized by who? I don't know. But, let's dig down to what really matters. Do you have, by virtue of your experience, your training, your expertise, do you have the knowledge and skills to help people solve a meaningful problem, right? And many people do. And, the people that we serve, they're coaches, consultants, speakers, authors. These are people who have built a living around helping others with their knowledge and expertise. And so if you have that knowledge and expertise that is valued by other people, that allows you to solve problems that other people can't solve, there's usually an opportunity to turn that into an online course, because people value and want that knowledge and expertise anyway. Here we just allow you to deliver it with more leverage.
You make the mention of other people. So maybe you have a talent or a skill that can help other people. Let's just talk about that for just a second, which is, do I have to help millions of other people to have a good idea? Does thousands of people? Like, if I have an idea to help 3 to 6 year olds sleep that have a special condition, like, is there even really a market? How do I know if my idea is too big or too small?
So I love that question. And part of it depends on what kind of an online course are we talking about. Online courses become this like catch-all bucket topic.
Yeah.
And really there's two categories of online courses. There are, what people call info products, right? Which is essentially a bunch of videos and a membership site. It's a book in a different format.
Yeah.
And the info product market has become very saturated, very commoditized. It's becoming more and more competitive, higher and higher production value and celebrity instructors, and the costs are being driven to the floor, right? And so if you want to do well with info product, you have to sell very substantial volume, right? Because, if you want to make a lot of money and you're multiplying it by a small price tag, you've got to multiply it by a lot. But where there is, and it's very hard to do that for a variety of reasons, but where there is a really substantial opportunity is if we look at saying, I'm not just going to deliver information, I'm going to deliver transformation, right? If we think about how people develop competence, there are 3 steps in a learning journey, right? So the first step is the consumption of new information, new ideas. So that's watching the videos, listening to the audios, reading the text, attending the lecture. And absorbing that information is an important starting point. And information can do a lot of things for us. It can expand our horizons. It can show us new possibilities. We can take that knowledge and integrate it into existing expertise. But information by itself does not impart competence. We don't get good at things by watching videos or reading books. In order for that to happen, we need to apply what we're learning. And that application can be theoretical, exercises and worksheets, or practical, doing things in real life in our businesses. And then we need a feedback loop to tell us, what are we doing well, what are we not doing well, so we can improve and integrate what we're learning. And that feedback can be very brute force, right? If I'm learning skateboarding, then the feedback can come from concrete and gravity, or it can be a little more nuanced from a teacher, an instructor, a coach, a guide. And where you have all 3 of these steps, the opportunity for people to consume the information, to then apply it, and then get that feedback, that's where real transformation happens. That's what's worth paying a premium for. I think $1,000, $2,000, et cetera, dollars. And so if you're looking at those numbers, you don't have to multiply $1,000, $2,000 plus dollars by that many customers for it to start being really interesting, right? And so is the market big enough? You've got to do some research. How many people really have this problem and how urgently do they feel it? But this is not the sort of thing where, with info products, you've got to sell tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of spots for it to add up to much. With real transformational products, Dozens adds up to kind of a lot of money. Hundreds is really a lot of money. Thousands, you're like rolling in it, right? So the scale is completely different.
So let's talk about the value for a minute. So I've written these questions down because I'm like, I think I know what I want to. It's almost like you kind of queue up for us because this is perfect. So, okay, you're right. There's a lot of info products out there, and you say it great, perfectly. Really low price. They got celebrities that come in now. How do you compete with a $7 or a $27 product? You got to sell tons of them. So, okay, let's sell $1,000 or $2,000 product. But wait a minute, what about dog training? I mean, someone going to pay $1,000 to $2,000? Like, how do I know the value with my high school diploma? How do I know the value that I have that someone would pay $1,000 or $2,000? Like, maybe I just think it's too expensive.
Well, here's what it comes down to. How important is this to the person you're looking to help? Right? And so let's look at dog training, right? So, how important is dog training? First of all, let's recognize that people spend enormous amounts of money on their pets. Like,
totally
anything
agree.
you do with pets is actually a huge market opportunity, which is
right.
befuddling to me because I'm not a pet person, but I know this reality about the world. Yeah. But let's talk about dog training. Well, dogs exist on a spectrum of how well or not well behaved they are. And if your dog is mostly well behaved, needs to be a little better behaved, maybe you don't feel that need so acutely. Whereas if your dog is like a disaster, it's a much more urgent problem. That's the first dimension. Second dimension is, what is the impact that has in your life, right? Are you unable to maintain a relationship because you can never go out because you've got to be home with your dog? That's a big cost. That's a big challenge. Or do you really not have much to do anyway, right? So if it's a severe problem, if it's having significant impact on your life, and then, of the people for whom it's having a significant impact in their lives, some are going to have more means than others, right? So, let's pretend that you're a doctor, you're super busy, you're working hard, you're making good money, you have no time for a social life, so you get a dog so you have some interaction with another living being. The dog is not well behaved. You're busy all the time. You don't have time to deal with this. You're exhausted at the end of the day. You can't go out on the occasional opportunity for a date because the dog is going to make a mess while you're away. For this person, it is a serious, urgent problem. They absolutely have the means to afford getting that help, and they don't have the time to figure it out themselves, right? Education fundamentally is a shortcut. Education is about getting you to an outcome with less time or less cost or less risk than otherwise would have been involved. And for some people, right, based on how much they care about the problem, how urgent it is, and what their opportunity cost is, it's absolutely worth it. So will everyone want to spend $2,000 to learn how to train their dog? No, absolutely not. Will some people care enough? Yes, very likely.
I want to talk about market research in a minute, but you touched on something in a previous conversation that I really want to make sure that we touch on. But before I do that, I want to make sure, again, if you guys are interested, guys or gals who are interested in this information, you'll see a link that'll pop up on your screen. It's called thebelt.live/Danny, thebelt.live/Danny. You get access to this book in here. You'll find some bonuses inside the book as well, too. There's 3 additional bonuses in here. So I want people to obviously get to know you. That's why we're doing the interview, right? People can read the book here to get to know you just a little bit more. But you touched on something that was really important that I know that as entrepreneurs are going through this journey, as Amy's going through this journey, I know that she starts to get some advice. And what happens is you can get advice from family and friends, and sometimes they are well-meaning enough, or they tell you to go out and get a job, which is totally cool. Other people will tell you that you got to build this huge website, do all these different things, and you can hire specific coaches who will tell you to do one thing. But you also talk about, Amy, finding a mastermind. How do you find the right group of people to have that sounding board that you talked about before? Are these prices right? Can I do this? Do I have the talent to do this? Does this make sense? How do you find the right people to mesh with to know that you're getting good feedback?
Well, so that's a really interesting question, because I would argue that the primary value of a mastermind is not the feedback per se, right? Although the feedback is important. I think the most important value of a mastermind is that it is a place where you can go where everybody understands you, right? Everybody gets what you're doing, right? And so, there's a scene in the book where, Amy has this whole crisis and all this stuff happens. She goes to talk to the mastermind and she does get good advice. She talks through it with them. And I think that's important. But the most important thing is that she has a place to go where she feels understood and seen. So that's the first thing. You want to be in in collaboration with people who are your peers, right? We all want, yes, I'd like to be in a room with people who are light years ahead of me, but the reality is that I'm not going to get all that much from them. They're not going to get all that much from me. So, you want them to be around the same level that you are, but you want them to get you. You want them to be invested in your success the way you are in theirs. And you want them to be supportive, right? That's the first thing. Now, the feedback in a mastermind is really valuable as long as A, you respect the people in the room, and B, by virtue of their character and by virtue of the norms of interaction, there isn't overreaching, right? So in other words, when I lead masterminds, I tell everyone, we want to hear everyone's opinion, but we want you to draw from your own experience. Tell us about what you've done. Tell us about what you've experimented with. Don't tell us about what you heard about on a webinar, right? In other words, talk about the things that you actually know. So as long as people are talking about what they actually know and they're applying their critical thinking and creativity to give you another lens on your problem, it's always valuable. Where it becomes challenging, where it becomes kind of the blind leading the blind, is where everyone is positing half-baked on things that they don't really know and understand, and they're not being kind of explicit with themselves or with the rest of the table about the limits of that experience.
That's great. That's a really great answer. I appreciate that, Danny. So we're going to go back just a little bit to market research. Okay, so I got this belief system that dog training, for example. Okay, I got a system and I can help dogs not chew on things and not pee inside. Like for someone like myself, I live in an 18-story apartment, and to take the dog out multiple times a day gets extremely frustrating. So I got this special process. I got that. I know that people who live in apartments like mine can afford this. And just like the doctor scenario, that all makes sense. Now I got to do some market research and testing. So I'm going to go in a couple of different ways. From me running ads, I know a lot of people are like, I got a great idea. I'm just going to run ads and that's great. And I'm like, how much research do they do? And they're like, nothing. We just started running ads. I'm like, oh my goodness. But other people will spend years doing market research before they start. So what's a good kind of line or definition to say, this is good enough for market research, you should start moving forward, or you should cut and run? When do you know when enough is enough or when you should cut and run?
Sure. So there's two dimensions to that. First of all, are you gathering rich enough data, right? Because if your market research consists of reading comments on blogs and reviews on Amazon and looking at, I don't know, demographic census data, it just isn't rich enough to give you a lot of insight. So it can be useful to spend an afternoon doing some of that just to validate some assumptions. But you're never going to get a really strong, yes, absolutely, the opportunity is there signal from that level of information, right? So you need something richer. You really need to be clear on, well, who is my ideal customer? And you need to talk to them, right? It's such a simple thing. And yet people it's this hurdle for them to overcome. You've got to talk to people. And it doesn't have to be an elaborate, complicated conversation, right? When it comes to this topic, what is your greatest struggle? What is your greatest frustration? What have you tried so far? What has worked? What has not worked? Why is it important for you to solve this? We're talking about a 10, 20-minute conversation, right? And so you've got to think about, well, who could plausibly be an ideal customer? Not that you have to convince them to buy. It's not a sales conversation, right? But case in point, let's say we're going with the dog training analogy for people who live in a building like yours, an 18-story building, back of the napkin, 18 stories times what, 10 apartments per floor. So that's 180 families. If you were to just go door to door, knock on every door, let's say what, 20% of them have pets?
I was going to say that 20%. Absolutely. Is exactly what I was going to say. Yep.
So you have a conversation with 20% of 180 people. That is 36 people. And you ask them these questions. So 36 people times, let's call it 20 minutes, right? We're talking about what? You can get this done in a week or two. It doesn't have to be that big of a deal, right? And how do you know when enough is enough? There are two kind of triggers. One trigger is, okay, the patterns are emerging, right? And I can't say, well, you have to have 5 conversations or 10 or 20, because the thing about looking for data in a statistically meaningful sample is that how much you need the result to be depends on how pronounced it is. So if you talk to 8 people and 7 out of the 8 all give you the same answers, strong, clear pattern, you're onto something. If you talk to 8 people and only 2 of them say the same thing, it's like, okay, maybe there's a pattern. I don't know. I'm going to talk to another 8 or 10. See if that 2 becomes 4 or 5, and you kind of have a sense of, okay, it's a minority, but there's a pattern. It's consistent, right? So that's really what you're looking for. The other trigger is like, okay, look, I've had 30 conversations, 40 conversations, 50 conversations, 100 conversations. There's still no pattern. At some point, you wave the white flag. Maybe there's nothing here, right? Or I need to change my approach.
Because that's always interesting, because I always hear this saying, I talked about this on an interview just recently, where, the captain goes down with the ship. I'm the one who created this thing. I'm going to go to, well, as an entrepreneur, you have to be really good to know when to walk away. You have to know when to be able to cut. So that's interesting to say,
but
hey, if you're not finding any.
The ship. The product isn't the ship. The business is the ship.
Good, Danny.
Right? So you can steer the ship in another direction. That is the captain's job. The captain's job is not to just sit on the Titanic and wait for it to go down.
Yeah, you don't have to sink. You can just turn. That's why I love you, Danny. Okay, so I understand now. I got the belief system, let's just say, right? I got the belief system. I got a system. I know. I've done some market research. I've asked some of my neighbors. Now, here's the next thing. Do I huddle up in my apartment for the next 6 to 8 weeks and work on the perfect training course? Do I start telling people, hey, I'm thinking about selling it? What do I just build the course only and then sell it? Do I get some information to some hot buyers first? Where do I put my first attention at?
Sure. So
build it or sell it.
People have particularly, so the best people to build courses are people with real, substantial, legitimate expertise. That's who should be creating a course. And by virtue of their expertise, they tend to be pretty perfectionist about what the course should be. Right. And that's a trap. Right. Because we imagine, okay, I've got to hole up in my apartment, hole up in my back cave, and create the perfect, polished, ultimate course. I can promise you it will not be that, right? Axiomatically, it cannot be that, because this is the first time you are doing it. It's the first time you're delivering this content to these people in this way. And that means you're going to have a lot of assumptions about what you think will happen, how you think they'll react, what you think they'll absorb, understand, etc. And your assumptions, because you are an expert in your field, are probably mostly right, but some of them are wrong and you don't know which.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to adapt on the fly. So the first step is you create a really high level outline, like, 1, 2, 3 pages of bullets. This is what I'm going to cover. Lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3. It's going to run 5, 6 weeks. Here's what we're covering every week. Okay, I've got my high level outline. Then you go out and you sell it. You get people to pay you money to be in your first pilot course, which maybe is discounted, maybe it's not because it's the first run. We can talk a lot about pricing if you want, but they buy in. They're like, yes, I'm interested. You deliver the first one live. People say, well, that's not scalable. I have to do it again. The pilot is not supposed to be scalable. The pilot is still market research. Let's make sure this is what people want. Let's learn from the direct feedback of I'm delivering it on Zoom. I see their faces. I can tell instantaneously if they're confused. So I can make a note to adjust it. After the pilot, it went well. You take the feedback. Then you create the magnum opus perfect course.
What's interesting when you say that, the reason I'm smiling just ear to ear is because that's how I essentially got started, which is I was running the agency and we had 1 or 2 employees. I started taking some consulting calls because I like to do that. And a friend of mine helped me build kind of my first course, and we sold tens of $20s of dollars of that course. It just didn't, really work out so well. And then what ended up happening, I was doing these one-on-ones. My employee literally said, why do you just not do a group training? And I'm like, well, who wants to do the group training? Well, you've always thought about a course. Why don't you do the group training? So we go, well, we have a course that's $297. Well, we could update it. Well, we updated it. To force me to update it, we did a 6-week live course. When we sold that 6-week live course, we sold it for $1,750, which was much higher than we had ever sold anything before. All of a sudden, 17 people bought it. And all of a sudden, we had enough money to hire 3 more employees, get an office space. And that is what launched us our agency and everything else. And it was a game changer. And so many people are like, well, I got to build this perfect course. And I'll never forget a statement by a gentleman by the name of Mark Hoverson. Very first live event I ever went to. And unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But he said, your marketing sells your product and your product keeps people from refunding. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. If I created a pill or a course that cured cancer, no one's going to put that pill or take that course if they're not convinced to do so and why it's good for them and they're not going to get injured or anything else. So that is the marketing. So no one sees your course until they swipe the credit card. So yeah, I should figure out the marketing. So we were talking about the pilot release. Let's go on to this, which is perfectly aligned with the next question. But you hear these other people talk about a launch. We have friends that are in launches. You have very strong opinions on launches. I share some of them with you. But people get all excited about a launch. So now I got an idea. I got a pilot. So does that mean I call 12 of my friends to have them promote and we do a big coordinated launch? Do I just tell my friends and family? How public do I go with this first pilot? How big do I go, Danny?
Well, I mean, public and big are 2 different things, right? Like, you can be totally public. You're not hiding anything. It's not like a secret that, I'm doing this R&D. I hope nobody finds out until it's done. Right. It's not like that.
Right.
But you don't want to be huge about it. You don't want to make a big splash because you're still figuring things out. So, 10 people, 20 people in your pilot is a good chunk of money. It's good validation you're on track. It funds the development and it's manageable, right? If everyone's going to have two questions and that's 20 or 40 questions, you can manage that. If you do make a big splash and you have 100 people in there, you're going to get an enormous amount of questions. And imagine there are things that are not clear, which will, again, probably be the case somewhere along the way. You're just multiplying the headaches. So first you do the pilot, you fill it yourself, which should not be that hard if this thing has legs. And, we talk a little bit in the book about how to do that, et cetera. Then you learn from that experience, you make it into something more permanent. Then you're ready for the big launch. Because the other thing is that all these partners, even if they're good friends of yours, right? They're close, they're friends, they'll send an email promoting you as a favor. One email. They're not going to send 10 of them as a favor. If the first one bombs, if the first time they try to promote you as that favor doesn't work out because it's the first time you're doing it, you haven't ironed out the kinks, etc., you've kind of burned a lot of relationship capital. And for what? Like, what's the rush? Give it 6 months and then do it right.
I love this. So again, as you're watching this right here, make sure you grab this book right here. You'll see a link on your screen. It'll be the belt.live/Danny. It's the belt.live/Danny. There's some other bonuses that are in here too. There's 3 other bonuses. I can't articulate exactly what they are in here, depending on when you're watching this video, but trust me, you're going to want to get this. So Danny, this is second to the last question because I'm pretty sure you're going to say something really smart right here that I'm going to want to ask something else. So, okay. I got this belief system. I got this acronym. I got this method. I got this idea of how I'm going to build it. I got a couple of people who have signed up for the class, right? I got 3 people. This is super great. And if I get 15, that's my goal. And it just, first course just doesn't work. Like I got 3 people to sign up and I love what you said earlier. We don't have to sink the ship. We can steer it differently. But what happens if I go through all this effort and all of a sudden only 3 people show up to my live event? Do I just quit? Do I start all over? What do I do next?
Well, so the first thing you should do, this is going to be counterintuitive, but the first thing you should do is celebrate. Give yourself a high five because it could have taken you years to figure out that something about what you're doing is not quite right. And you've hopefully gotten there in weeks, maybe months.
Yeah.
You've literally saved years on your journey. So, I mean, it feels like a demoralizing moment, but actually like, this is great. High five. Awesome. Second, you want to look at, okay, which of my assumptions were off? What can I learn from this experience, right? We go back to the market research. We say, where can I pivot what I'm doing and find a better fit, better alignment between what I want to offer and what the market seems to want from me? And then we try it again. That's the whole point, right? We haven't burned up all the relationship capital. We haven't, business writer Jim Collins talks about firing bullets before cannonballs. Right? So first you fire the bullets, make sure you're on track, you're aiming right. Then you fire the big cannonball. That's the whole point, right? You fired a bullet, took a few weeks or months of your time. You learned a lot. Great. Adjust, recalibrate, time for another bullet.
This is so good. So again, you'll see the link on your screen. Again, the belt.live/Danny, the belt.live/Danny. Make sure you grab the book here. I'm reading the book before the interview and I just really get stuck in the book because a lot of times what I'll do is I like to speed read to get concepts, but I'm not really getting the story, right? I can understand. And when I'm reading something technical, I can kind of speed read it and I can definitely understand here a couple of bullet points. But I was literally slow reading it because I was interested and I was kind of curious what was going to happen next. And I really love it. So again, make sure you grab the book right here. We've got some other surprises for you too. Danny, is there anything else that I'm missing that you want to communicate with people? Online courses have changed my life. Your insight have changed my life. When I got sued by the Facebooks, you called me within days and gave me insight. I know where I was standing, what I was wearing, the way I was looking. I know the conversation we had. Like, you give me a huge impact on my life. So I can't wait to tell more people about this because this has impacted my life huge too. Anything else you want to tell everybody while we're still here?
Well, I want to say thank you to you. I want to share with everyone just how much I appreciate Kurt. And I guess what I'll say to everyone is that online courses have been around for a long time, but every market goes through a process of maturation, right? I'm sure everyone who's watching this is familiar with Everett Rogers' Diffusion of Innovation. Even if you don't know the term, you've seen the bell curve with, innovators and early adopters and mainstream buyers, et cetera. So for the last couple of decades, online courses was slowly making their way through the markets of innovators and early adopters. And the pandemic just shoved the whole mainstream market into this opportunity, right? We saw literally 5 or 10 years worth of acceleration happen, in the course of weeks or months. And so all of a sudden you've got this massive, hungry, aware market that honestly doesn't have a lot of content serving them. There's tons of information courses. There are not a lot of transformation. So there's literally never been a better time to jump in and do this, to seize this opportunity, to own the space. So I hope everyone who's watching this will, first of all, pick up the book because I hope you love it. And hopefully it inspires you to do something that can be very impactful for you and your business.
You know what's great about this, Danny, just as you're talking about this, again, just full exposure and disclosure, again, go ahead and you'll see the link on your screen to go ahead and get the book. So I'm going to be running this video so people get to know you, because I don't sell how to create courses or all the things that we talked about. That's not something that I sell. I hope my audience, the people who are interested in courses, definitely pick this up. I mean, you get a high recommendation from me. I love this. Well, what I'm also doing, just to give you a little insight, is people who watch this video, some people may pick this book up, and I hope you do. Some people don't. Some people may be interested in my products and services too, which is great as we're talking about Facebook ad buying. Well, what I do is I use this content right here to keep warming people up to build a relationship, because what I'm doing is I'm taking my course, my $2,000 premium course that we've now raised the price to $3,000. I'm reshooting in the next couple of weeks, right after we promote you. In the next couple of weeks, we're gonna reshoot a 10-week course. This is gonna be our highest premium course before we go into our higher end mastermind. And everything that you're talking about here is exactly what we've done, what we're gonna be doing. And as people are watching this video, we'll be doing the same thing that you're teaching as well too. So it's life-changing information for me. It's been absolutely amazing. And like, Danny, I love you, appreciate you. The conversation we've had, family, with your wife, at the bar, at our different events, the different places we meet around the US. It's been amazing. I really appreciate you and love you. And again, pick up the book. Any final words you got, Danny, whatsoever?
Just thank you.
Yeah, that's it. All right. And by the way, Danny loves coffee cups and t-shirts. You got to check this guy out. It's pretty amazing. Thanks, Danny. Appreciate it. You have a great day, sir.
Thank you, Kurt. You too.